Right, so we start? In English, yes. Ah, right. Vediamo. Facciamo metà metà. Okay. So, here's my instrument that I'm going to use, is the software that I use for creating my visuals. I'll do a demo later to explain in a concrete mode how the software works and give a quick overview. That's the second part of the talk. The first part of the talk will be talking obviously about what I do and my history. So here you can see the software. I go into presentation mode. So in fact, I'm using the software like it's PowerPoint to make my presentation. Oops, sorry. So my tools here, my laptop, a powerful NVIDIA graphics card. I've got a keyboard to use to show how MIDI works with the software. So that's what you've got to look forward to. So let's start the presentation. Composing music and visuals, the convergence of visual and audio technologies. So what I'm going to talk about is how over the last 10 years, visual software and music software have converged and how now they're very able to exchange data. And we see a new breed of composers who are doing both things at once. They're creating their own visuals and they're creating their own music. So first I'll talk about myself, my history. I started learning piano when I was 5, so I'm a musician, clarinet at school. Then I studied computer science because I thought a musician's never get it. My school taught me a musician will never get a job. So I did a science degree because I was very good at mathematics, and then computer science. I was good at that. So musician, programmer, mathematician, those three together. Then I worked as a musician first. I paid my way through university playing in bands, playing in piano bars, and did that professionally for a number of years. Then I got a job as a programmer. I got sick of that, working in an office, programming, but it gave me the discipline. After that, this came along. The first computer graphics course conducted in Australia. This was in the 80s, 84. And this is my graduate film, for which I also composed the music. So it was my first experience in creating a visual and music together. The music was created, a couple of keyboards and a 4-track recorder, 1984. And interestingly, for people who don't know, because people are not usually familiar with the story of computer graphics, how it was born, this piece was on 16mm film, printed on 16mm film, and a big tape was sent to a bureau that did the printing, and on this tape we had all our images in some code, I've got no idea what. To create an image like this, back then, it took maybe 20 seconds. And you could see it drawing line by line, vector line, and it would create the image. Then the next one, then the next one. So some way you had to get these images either on a magnetic tape to send to be printed on 16mm film, which cost a lot of money, which we didn't have at the school. And they found a solution to print this film. They used a surveillance camera. So the program that was producing the image, it was a code-based program, would then send a beep to a surveillance camera which would take a photo of the monitor. So overnight we'd leave this script going and it was draw, click, and it would go all night, and then next morning we could come and look at our videos of our tests. In fact, I'll show you the film just quickly. It's on my website somewhere. No, actually, I think I've got it here. No, not that one. Where is it? Here. Audio? Yeah, there it is. Right, so student film. So after that, that led to a job in America for a couple of years, doing high-level computer graphics. Coming back to Australia, about 89, along came this, the Atari, for composing music. So suddenly I had an orchestra at my fingertips, and I could, and MIDI instruments, and just waiting for the convergence. At the same time, I met this guy, who was the founder of side effects software, which became Houdini, which is the software that I used. I met him because the company I was working for bought the software from this guy. It had just come out. So I've known him for 20 years. And here he is taking one of the work silicon graphics machines. These machines at the time, this would be about 94, were worth $50,000. So the boss of the company, he'd sneak out on the weekend and he'd go to rave parties in the desert with a couple of his collaborators, and they'd do visuals live for music, because that's his passion. Using exactly the same software that I was using for creating films. This is an example of the interface at the time. And it's very similar to what the software I use now is, because what happened, there he is again, having a great time, with probably $200,000 worth of equipment in front of him. At the same time, I was using the software to create films like this, late 90s. Meanwhile, Greg Hermanovic, the guy's name is, he was having a great time going out on the weekends and in doing his visuals. So then there became a turning point. Number one, I got really sick of doing special effects in movies. There was all, pressure, rendering, all slow. The thing that really changed, and the first point of this convergence I'm talking about, was around 2002, when Greg Hermanovic decided to take his Houdini software and convert it into something for real time, which was called TouchDesigner, which still exists, is what I use and what I teach. So that's the history of how TouchDesigner was born. Greg Hermanovic, Rob Bayros, Jared Smith. And why did this occur? Because there was faster CPUs, faster GPUs, the graphics card, and they were cheap. That's why this happened. And I remember that was about the time I bought my first laptop with a powerful. I used to do rendering and do all my 3D work on my laptop. So the convergence then via MIDI and OSC allowed TouchDesigner to talk to Ableton Live and Logic and other programs. In fact, TouchDesigner has a node inside the Ableton Live package, drag and drop, and you've got all your song information just streaming straight in. So it's a direct communication. So Greg contacted me and said, here's the software, try it out. So I immediately, it was perfect timing for at that point in my life. That led me to the possibility of being able to do visuals for music, which was my love. So here I was back hanging around with musicians and doing visuals for contemporary music. This is San Fedele, a piece by Nikolai Popov, played in New York. Teatro del Verme in Milan, Rassegna di Musica Contemporanea, which was organised by Ivan Quinn. And also in this music series, we were invited to, my students were invited to perform, which was fantastic. It was the students of doing a master's in interaction design, and I was teaching them TouchDesigner. And among those musicians, among those visual artists, there was people who also worked as VJs and were musicians, and they volunteered to do pieces for these concerts, which was a fantastic experience for them. Various other things, pictures at an exhibition with the rock version, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Video mapping, this was in Ugento 3 months ago. We're using TouchDesigner to do video mapping on the internal facade of a church, where to do the video mapping, all that's required is a scan of the wall. So I have a 3D model, and then I can re-render that model and then project it onto itself, the concept of video mapping. So here you see my interface, not my network for designing the content, the render, and then what gets projected on the wall. Lined up perfectly using MadMapper, I think we used. So for those who are interested in video mapping, either you can calibrate your render to fit exactly the projection space inside TouchDesigner, or you can export in real time the TouchDesigner render to something like MadMapper, which is probably more easy to use when you have to stretch and pull and line things up. This is from about 8 years ago, doing a virtual set for an opera, first opera ever done with a stereo projection. You can see the double column, 2 projectors, back projected, sitting behind the screen, a bit like you can do here. 2 projectors that are, and then the audience had stereoscopic glasses. Another opera in Australia, Monteverdi, with period instruments. And this was an interesting project just last year in Durban for ISEA, an interactive dance piece for visually impaired. Most of these kids they could see shadow, not much more. 2 were totally blind. So using the Connect, they performed. There was 2 choreographers who could see, who were directing and choreographing the piece. And we just recently redid that in Basel. And this is a recent project at the new MIAC, it's called, the new museum, Italian Museum for Audiovisual and Cinema in Rome at Cinecittà. So for this piece, this was called the Future Room, the final exhibition. There was 12 different rooms. It opens on the 15th of December this year. And this was the official inauguration for the politicians more than anything, and the press. So the room had this, they're installing the mirrors here, totally mirrored, with LED strips, which you can see here, LED strips all around the room, between the panels. This is the entrance where the ladder is. In the middle, there was a LED wall, a column. And here's my TouchDesigner interface doing the previs of the structure. There's the LED strips, and there's the LED wall column. Here's the render. And what you can see here is that is going to the LED wall, which wraps around the column. And this is going to the strips via MadMapper. So there's two exports, let's say. And this is using a protocol called Siphon, which is again a very important thing for people, for this convergence. Siphon allows one visual program to talk to another. So TouchDesigner can export to, let's say, processing or vice versa using Siphon. So in this case, I'm exporting a image that is 360 pixels high, because we have 360 LED lights here. And around here there's 24, so it's 24 pixels wide. 360 by 24, and that just goes out to the LED. So people who have a background in processing or have a background in Resolume or all the other programs, they can all talk, in the sense that Siphon sends from one to the other. So here's the inauguration. This is a photograph of one of the scenes. Now, to give you an idea of how quickly content can be produced, this was done in 3 days. I arrived on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. The inauguration was at 11 a.m. on Tuesday. The music was ready and was full of content to inspire. Lots of peaks for the sound reactive was perfect. As opposed to using After Effects or something like that, where you have to prepare your content, then render and change. And this, you could change everything in real time while the thing was running. While the thing was looping, it was a 4-minute loop. While the thing was looping around, you could change colors, anything, which was all done, a lot of that was done at the last minute. So now, here is an image from about 5 years ago, the first time I came here to this theatre, and there was a concert for the Biennale della Musica, and there was music by Russian composers. So this is where I met the Russians. These three guys, Nikolai Popov, for whom I did the visual, this visual here, Kra MP is the name of the piece. Nikolai Popov, Alexander Kubev, and Alex Nazdarov. Nikolai I've done collaborated with since I met him here. I've done maybe 20 pieces with him. And soon after meeting Nikolai at the concert here 5 years ago, I was invited to Russia to do a piece for this guy, who all three are graduates of the new music program at the Moscow Conservatorium. They also teach there. They both travel internationally. They all travel internationally, won prizes there. They're the best of the young breed. This guy is very interesting because apart from the fact he's a jazz pianist, put out a lot of CDs, he's also a fantastic programmer, Max MSP, and now he's learnt, and when I met him, we did a piece together, and he saw the visuals, and his music was quite wild. It was a piece for, looking for a photo. No, I don't have a photo. It was a piece for ensemble, 4-piece ensemble, and electronics, and LED lights. So I noticed when we're working together, he'd say, oh, that effect where things shake, that looks good. I'll take control of that, I'll send you OSC. Oh, that looks good. That color change, I like that. I'll control that from Max MSP. So that's what happened during the process. He'd see what animation I had, or what was animatable, and then he'd send me the data to animate it. So that by the end, when we did the show, I was just sitting there watching. I wasn't doing much anymore. Here's another concert where we're using video mapping, again at the Moscow Conservatorium. Music by Nikolai Popov. Great idea to hang just simple tele by wire. Another concert there, music by Igor Kefalides, who's the boss there. Another piece of Nikolai's. Okay, so history of sound reactive visuals. Well, I'm not really an academic, so this will be very brief. Scriabin is the first person who came to mind. Fischinger, another. Speaking of Scriabin, there's the Scriabin Museum in Moscow, which Nikolai took me to. Scriabin's keyboard, his light keyboard, each note represented by a colour. In the 30s, the first films, optical and magnetic soundtracks. First was the optical soundtrack. With the optical soundtrack, it's a bit like what we see in TouchDesigner when we're reading in the audio file. Here, this. What's that? That's an audio file being read in. And here's the waveform that's produced. Running at 44,000 hertz. 44,000 per second. So that was the first way sound was put on film, with optical soundtrack. And Fischinger used to watch the optical soundtrack and scratch on the film. He had an eye for the optical soundtrack, an eye for what the optical soundtrack looked like, and could associate that with the music, and that's how he started doing his visuals. And here's some pieces of his. Actually, I have a video of this one. Yes. Volume, audio.
Introduce to you the soundtrack. All right, come on.
This is from Fantasia.
I just happened to run across him one day at the Disney Studios.
The
But when I
soundtrack.
did, I suddenly realized that here was not only an indispensable member of the organization, but a screen personality whose possibilities nobody around the place had ever noticed. And so, I'm very happy to have this opportunity to introduce to you the soundtrack. All right, come on. That's all right. Don't be timid. Add a soundtrack. Now, watching him, I discovered that every beautiful sound also creates an equally beautiful picture. Now, look. Will the soundtrack kindly produce a sound? Go on. Don't be nervous. Go ahead. Any sound? Well, that isn't quite what I had in mind. Suppose we hear and see the harp. Now one of the strings. Say, oh, the violin. And now one of the woodwinds, a flute. Very pretty. Now let's have a brass instrument, the trumpet. All right. Now, how about a low instrument, the bassoon? Go on. Go on. Drop the other shoe, will you?
It's a bit too American, right? Very, very Disney. But I wish I could animate like that. So other images of Fischinger. So when I first started looking at going to bands at university, I'd see stuff like this. I remember watching the optical printer and the gels. They still do it, that retro look. Visuals of the 70s. Who is it? Yeah, Frank Zappa. Then this appeared, the Fairlight. This would have been mid-80s. Okay, then TouchDesigner, early 2000s. Which, here we are, this input is showing a tracking device, I think leap motion, where you've got finger positions down the list here. All this information's coming in, finger positions, rotations. For example, if one wanted to do something tracking the conductor's hand, as long as he didn't go too high, you'd be tracking it with the leap motion, this big USB device which costs 70 euros and will track up to about this height. So the process, how I do my visuals, what goes in and on in my little brain. So my first lesson when I did visuals, the first time, yes, when I was working at NABA, was for a piece by Giovanni Verando. And he said, fammi delle proposte. Ho fatto vedere 3-4 cose, sound reactive, pensando allora è quello che vorrà vedere. Lui ha detto, no, la musica lo dice già. No, buttalo, no. Dammi qualcosa che funziona come contrappunto. Bing, giusto, giustissimo. So he was happy with just something that did this very slowly while the music went crazy, or sometimes the opposite, something that does this and the music's like this. Complete contrast between visual and what you hear is very, very stimulating. If it's done right, it adds to what's in the music, but there's no point. Sometimes reinforce what's in the music, but best to work across it as if it was another line, another musical line. So obviously research a theme, listen, and then start to imagine, which is the hard part. For me, it can take months. If I have a piece at San Fedele, for example, I like to have the music 3 months in advance so I can listen to it, and then it takes weeks for any ideas to come. So how are those ideas stimulated? Well, obviously by the music. The music always leads. As a singer in an opera will say, the music tells me what to do at any point, when to pick up the knife, when to turn around, when to whatever. And the other thing that I see these visuals as is a type of light design, like a virtual set that maybe can be just changes in color, or as if it was just a light on the wall. The other thing is the animation of the piece. The obvious comparison is dance. What a dancer thinks and does with a piece of music, how they interpret it. For me, it's the same. So a new technique often works as an inspiration. I might see something on the forum or on a tutorial that is just a technique, and I think, oh, that's interesting, I'd like to try that. I'll make that work in a piece, if it fits. Which is nothing unusual. It's like the etude so many composers wrote for a particular process of the fingers. So since my background is in 3D animation, and modeling was all part of the job, particle effects, etc., I heard this new word, temporal sculpture, which I like. In fact, that's what I'm doing. If it's a piece that's mainly 3D, and most of my pieces are, that I use 3D rendering and modeling, I like to create something that's a 3D object that I can then move around, obviously, relight, that changes shape according to the music. So it's being rebuilt in real time, made with curves or whatever. So in the end, what I'm creating is a visual instrument that I can control somehow, not usually with a keyboard, but that's only for my demo, usually with a Behringer MIDI controller with 8 sliders and 8 knobs. That's more than enough. That's flexible, that's unpredictable, and maybe shocking, surprising. So here, another example of video mapping at San Fedele. When I first did a concert there, I said, I don't want to use that screen, because I thought the screen comes down. People sit in front of it like they're going to watch a movie and they expect a movie. And I thought, no, I'll just use what's there, because the speakers are so amazing to look at. Project onto and the stage is beautiful. Project onto the stage and relight the stage and the speaker system to produce very unexpected results. So this is an example from one, this is the piece, La Création du Monde. This is my interface, to give you an idea how I work live. So all this is I build very quickly inside TouchDesigner. On the left you can see a series of cues. So go, for example, I press that button, and what that does is triggers an animation that maybe lasts 30 seconds where something fades up, or an animation of whatever. So here's all the different events that I've thought up for the duration of the piece, 50 minutes, or 1 hour, 10 minutes. And here I write the time code because I'm working with a recorded version, and also for the Acquasmornium at San Fedele, it's always recording, so always I know when the things happen. Whereas if I'm doing a live performance, an opera, whatever, we have cuffie, microphone, and we're listening to regia that gives us the cues when everything happens. Get ready for cue number 25, go. Here down on the left, I have a series of 8 sliders, which are the same as my MIDI sliders, which in case I don't have the MIDI controller with me, I can do the manual version, which obviously with the mouse is not as smooth as using a MIDI controller. Then there's various other buttons for turning the projector on, switching between live audio in and reading a WAV file. Right, the demo. In fact, there's a few demos. First, I'll show a piece that's already finished. Okay, what? This one. It's a piece of Nikolai Popov. Okay. Go. So it's a 3D model that's slowly we're moving the camera away. Then here I have controls to change that geometry. Different buttons to turn on the lines. So here, I can change the rotation speed in X, Y, and I just do that how I feel it according to the music. Off. On. Off. So it's actually just driving a speed controller. Very simple. Opacity of the glass. Where's Stravinsky? I'll jump ahead. Then in a second, Rite of Spring appears. No. This turns on the color. Zoom. So all these things, how you feel. Okay, that gives an idea. So now the demo. Here I've got a piece, what is it? It's, I want to demonstrate the use of a keyboard. Right, so I've got a Oxygen 8 attached as a MIDI device, and here are the MIDI notes coming in, MIDI in map. Okay, so I'm going to use that to position, I think, a gnome. Let's see if that works. Yeah, there. Why would I want to do this? Because of this piece here. Let's just get the audio out. Otherwise, how could I sync it? If I didn't have a keyboard, impossible, because you can't click a button that fast. So this is one rare example where I needed a keyboard. And sometimes it depends on the piece, but usually I don't have to sync that fast. So for this, watch the drummer like everyone else. It's just like playing in a band again. I love it. So now a quick demo. I'll delete all this. First, I select an audio file, maybe something else. Okay, I've selected an audio file. I don't hear anything. Why? Because I have to tell the audio where to go. Because it could be going to an audio card, it could be going to a projector, it could be going anywhere. So I've told it where the file's where it's going. Notice also you can have all these channels. So up to, what's that? I think 16 channels going out if you have the right hardware. Same coming in. If I use a M audio device, USB, and that's reading, can read up to 6 channels. If, for example, the orchestra has microphones spread around, but not that it would work very well. Okay. So let's just take one channel, select, and I'll convert it immediately into an image. It's a bit hard to see, but there it is. Look. So what's it done? It's created an image that's 800 pixels wide and 1 pixel high, and it's just a grayscale showing the amplitude of the signal coming in. Maybe it's a bit clearer if I first do a spectrum analysis, audio spectrum, and take it from there. Much clearer. So we've got it there. Representation of the audio spectrum. Okay. So let's just put that over, composite over. I'll take just a black image, set the resolution, because default is small, 256 by 256 pixels. I'll set it to be, this'll do, Full HD. It's a preset. So I'll put this, composite, multiply, no. Here you can see all the composite tools that you have in After Effects. So I composite this over that, or I'll just say add it to, that'll do. And let's display that. There it is there. Let's sort of brighten it up a bit. So that's a pure just representation of the audio spectrum. And then it's being rendered out at full HD, and that can go straight to the projector. So that's the simplest example. Let's do another thing. We'll take a ramp. Again, I'll set it to be full HD. Create some keyframes. Okay. Different types of ramp. Horizontal, vertical, radial, circular. So here we can change the phase of the circular, and it just keeps repeating. Great. Let's just look at it big. Also, what else can I play with? I can play with the period, the number of repetitions. Color, of course. Okay, so now, how do I animate these? I could attach it to a slider, but what I'm going to do is use the audio. So I'll reset these to 1 and 0. So let's say I use the period and yeah, I'll move the phase with the audio. So here's the audio. I'll just drag and drop that here and see what happens. Absolutely frenetic. So it's taking something that's arriving at 40,000 hertz, super fast, and attaching it to a parameter. Not the best way to do things, but gives an idea. Best is to do an analyze the audio coming in, and look for these various methods of doing the audio analysis. And I'll choose this one and see what that does. Totally different thing. So this makes sense. Compared, I'll just bypass this, turn it off. This is without the analyze. Nonsensical with the analyze. Okay, so this analyze is taking in all the vibrations of the music. I could do some sort of filter on the music to take out frequencies, but a simple way of doing it is with this. It's like a sort of blur on the music. Just to visualize that, I'll just trail, just so you can see it. This trail is recording what's the values coming in. See the difference here? Now it's much smoother because it's cut out a lot of the small differences in frequency we're not interested in. With and without. That's taking the analyze and sending it directly to the ramp. And this is then analyze, then do the filter, then send it to the ramp. Big difference. So I can make it more ease in, more lazy. So, which is something you can have on your MIDI controller, so you can say, I want either choose between the lazy version and the aggressive version. Just to see those numbers, I've recorded, you can see I've sent this to the Trail Records. I'll send both there so we can see the difference of the two numbers. You can see it there clearly, what the lag has done. It's taken out all these little peaks. It's sort of like a post filter. Now the other thing I wanted to play with was, no, let's say, I might change these around. I'll send that here. Yeah, that's good. I'll probably have to recalibrate that to work better. And then I'll move it as well. First I'll recalibrate this to get it right. See, those values are going from 0.4 down to 0. Say 0 to 0.4. I want that to be, when it's 0, I want it to be the other way around. So I've reversed it. It was 0 to 0.4, now it's going to be 1 to 0.1. Yeah, good. Now the other thing I want to animate is the phase. So this is where what I was talking about before, the speed controller. Let's move this. Speed. Send this to a speed. Just have a look record what that's doing. So it's like putting your foot on the accelerator, up and down, using that value as a speed controller. So that I'll try sending here and see what happens. So it keeps traveling out. So I'm modulating two things, the frequency, the number of repetitions, and the speed which it travels. And this probably I have to recalibrate, make it bigger. Yeah, now it's moving faster. A lot faster. Constantly playing with numbers. Okay, so that's a demo. The communication. So this is the concert where I first did with Nazdarov. Transparent screen projected from behind with the musicians on either side of the screen. Fantastic. And the audience on either side of the screen. It was a warehouse theatre that had 3 levels and people all around. So, the teaching. My best students are musicians. Absolutely true. When I do workshops, someone who's fast and doesn't ask many questions or makes a very good question, I say, are you a musician? And always, yes. And we can ask, why is that so? Maybe someone can tell me. Because they're wired differently, the brain. So again, Ableton Live and TouchDesigner. It's a very complex model they've produced. It's drag and drop from the palette, which maybe I'll show in the afternoon. Okay, so this is a workshop at the Milan Conservatorium for about 15 students. There in the foreground you see a motorised LED light, which was part of the workshop. So we could show, because the idea was to give students an overview of what was possible for performance, not just visuals on a screen, but video mapping, the use of lighting, all driven by the audio. Or driven by Ableton, driven by MIDI, driven by OSC, whatever instrument they use, driven by Max MSP. The use of a webcam. So here, this was a lesson, how to use the webcam and process the image, slice it up into pieces, offset, which was actually their idea, so I modified the lesson to follow. So this is teaching the kids. This was a workshop at the computer science faculty in Canberra for kids, another one in Milan. All these were they were children of friends of mine who begged me to do a course for them when they saw the Connect and when they saw all the interactive stuff. This one here, his father's a jazz guitarist, and his dream is doing visuals for shows, and he saw the MIDI controller and fell in love with it and had to do it. And this one is now studying Unity for video games. So the workshop in Canberra, we also had a hula hoop expert, a friend of mine from Sydney. So, and she had a device which attaches to the hoop, which sends, like a gyroscope, sends the rotation and the rotation speeds and the orientation of the hoop to the via Bluetooth here. So there's the values you can see on the graph behind of the data coming in. So thereby we'd have the lesson for the kids. Second day was like a 5-hour lesson. They learned about the ramps, about how to do simple stuff, and then we introduced the idea of data streaming in. What can we do with it? What can we drive with that data? So one simple thing I gave them, this sausage, which is a tube which is displaced by noise. And the speed of that displacement was driven by the hoop. So they did so well, and during the week I had a course for adults. The kids did so, and at the end of the week, on the Friday night, we'd planned a performance for the adults to do their visuals with a live band. But the kids were so good, we decided to include the kids at the beginning. So they all came along to the show, and here's one of them performing with the hoop. So one was on the left on the laptop, driving the visuals and using the controllers that they'd set up. And then there was one who was performing, so best of both worlds. So they're out there dancing playing with a hula hoop, programming, creating visuals, and a live band behind them. So there they are. Actually, I'll show you a video of that. of that program. On my website here. There. Go back, the Wi-Fi's not No, the Wi-Fi's letting us down. That's a pity. Ah, yes, there is one other thing. I want to show you a trailer. Where is it? Yeah, this is a trailer that they did at the Moscow Conservatorium to sell tickets for their show, a show last year. So after my experience with the kids, my suggestions for the classroom. Imagine in the 80s if I had have had that technology at my fingertips for creating my student film, let alone learning it at school. So programming at schools, that's happening already. Underfinanced, hard to find the right people. Music education is never enough. Software education. Then music and visuals and interactivity, those three things together for kids would be something to drive an incredible enthusiasm. So I suppose from all my experience with different musicians and composers, because often I ask the people I've taught, where does your inspiration come from if you're doing visuals and music? Because there's not so many around who do it. Like Alexa, he learned TouchDesigner, he's coding GLSL shaders, he's doing very complex stuff. I asked him, I've asked a number of people I collaborate with or who I've taught, how do you start? Some say they're born together. Obviously, they'll have a theme. First comes the audio, first comes the visuals. More often than not, I hear the music comes first from people who are doing both. Others say that it's a parallel process where one will inspire the other and it goes backwards and forwards. In fact, that's what I found way back in the 80s when I wrote the piece of music partly, then started to write the create the visuals, which was a much, much slower process. I found that one would feed the other. And that happens with my work with Popov, where he sends me a piece, I start working on it, he replies, I send them the first version. Great, at 5 minutes, 6, could you put in more colour? At 6 minutes, 8 seconds, can you do this, can you do that? And the list is always long. And then I send my list to him. I said, well, the visuals is working there, but I think it needed something to push it at that point, because maybe a visual that evolved to a certain point and there was something lacking in the music. So it's always two-way. More him giving me orders than me giving him, I must admit. So a new art form, I imagine, well, obviously it is. Hybrid composition, visuals and music. So that's about it, the talk. I mean, we can do more demo if anyone's interested, or certainly questions. But the demo, yeah, well, maybe more hardcore demo. That's what everyone's interested in, I imagine. Yep. No questions yet? No. Oh, one, good.
Kind of file?
Any audio file?
Visual, like any image. Or
Yeah, here. Anything. This reads either bananas, or it'll read TIFF file, any format. That's all the formats it'll read. Movies, live camera in, movie device in, video device in, yeah, there it is. In comes the webcam. You can do what you like with it, or any camera you have attached. So you're dealing with both movies and still images, and it's what you do with them. So just to go, the lesson would usually begin like this. Through the various families of operators, let's go to what we're familiar with. Images, composite, blur, the ones that are darker shaded means that it's an input. For example, web render will render a web page. Depending on your Wi-Fi, it could be a bit slow. Very slow. Okay, leave that. Touch in, touch out means that another instance of TouchDesigner is running and sends its images to the second instance, which is mainly set up for working across a network. For example, there was a video mapping done in Abu Dhabi with 64 projectors. I heard a talk about it. 64 projectors. And they had workstations, each workstation output for 4 or 6 projectors. So they had, which meant like 10 workstations all networked together and synced together. So they're all playing the same thing, but real-time visuals. So, and also you hear the siphon spout out. There. Let's just test that. Siphon spout out. Let's say I open up another TouchDesigner. And hopefully, siphon spout in. Yeah. It's immediately got the banana. just to prove that that's what's happening. I'll just resize. Resize and do something to it over here. Transform. So, one pipes to the other. But of course, rather than TouchDesigner here, that could be processing, that could be any software you want. So going through again the families. Where was I? Tops, texture operators, images. Text. There's another category here which is all text-based, like Excel files, tables. This is where you write your code. But a simple version is, if I write in this text file, or cut and paste from Word document, whatever, I'll tell this to render that as text. So for example, to do the credits for the show in Basel we recently did, it took like 2 minutes to get the text ready to do the credits. And then let's say after you want them to scroll, there. Animate that. Which brings me numbers. How do you produce numbers to animate? That brings me to this category, which we saw before with the green category, is numbers. You know, I could use that number. It's not appropriate, but I could use that to animate. The audio animating the text. What I'd probably want is a button and a trigger that goes from 0 up to 1. And then send that to here. Also in transform, this is a very common look for people doing visuals. You do the transform only on one of the channels, the classic. So I've said transform on the green and blue channel, leave out the red channel. That's all. It's like a mask. So I'll delete this. Reset that. One of my favourites that I use all the time in chops, that's channel operators, is the classic noise. What noise is like smooth random numbers. A noise algorithm takes a series of random numbers and then interpolates between them. But it works in, the magical thing about it is you can move it, translate it in all directions. So algorithmic calculation, different types of noise. Different functions. But the magic is you can translate it left and right, up and down, and also in time. Same thing exists for an image. noise image. RGB, black and white. And you can use this to distort, for example. If I want to displace this image with the noise, there it is, way too much. Just a small amount. I might delete this just to make it more obvious. Okay. Which becomes more interesting, of course, when you find something to animate it with. So everything's animatable, you just have to think how and why. Anyway, where was it? Yeah, this, yeah. What I want to do is use a noise function now to do like a camera shake, a jitter. Okay, so rather than a clip of noise, which is 10 seconds long, it's given me like let's say, a strip of noise. Let's just say it's going to just give us one noise value per second, which is what I'm interested in. I want to use this to move that text around as if it was a camera shake. Just to prove I'm recording that noise now. Gives me this. If I turn that off, you see it's the same thing. So the difference is here it's given me 10 seconds of it, 600 instances, let's say, 600 samples. Turn this on and it'll give us just one every frame. TouchDesigner, like a projector, runs at 60 frames a second. Okay, so I'll use this. Yeah, to transform that. I'll put it to here. Let's give it both. We'll make two. We'll call it TX and TY. So now we've got two channels of noise. Both different. Perfect. So I'll use that to move this. Drag and drop. It's too much, so I just decrease the amplitude of it. But when it becomes more interesting is when I modify the frequency. So often what I do is modify the frequency with the audio. So it's more jittery when the audio is louder and smoother when the audio is softer. Or do it with a slider, whatever. The next category, the next family, is the surface operators. This is all about 3D geometry. For example, a sphere. Let's again use noise. Here. Which is modifying the sphere with the same sort of noise function. And that's moving somehow. Let's look why. There's something in here that's making it move that they've put in by default. And it's just something to do with time. So I could attach that to the audio, the same one. There. Let's just multiply that by 10, make it more obvious. Okay, so now we've got a jittery 3D ball, which is ready to be rendered in a 3D scene with the lighting, etc. With kids, I give that to them the first lesson because it looks like Play-Doh. Okay, so what else is in this family? Here in this family, you can read in 3D models taken from laser scans that you find on the internet. It reads about 20 different formats with file in. Here you go, searching for a file. I don't know what they've got in the library. Teapot. The classic. SketchUp. Let's see if just exchange one with the other and see the teapot wobble. So often in my lessons, people know nothing about 3D and they learn just enough to do a few simple things like that. I have to teach them what X, Y, and Z are. They forget. More in the family. Oculus Rift for doing VR. That, I think, is a model of the controller. Right? No, must be broken. Oh, there it is, yeah. They give you just as a help, the controller. In case, if you're doing a VR job, often they show a model of the controller so you know where the hands are. So for example, if in my workshops on the last day, we do an hour of VR. So beforehand I get them to do maybe a sphere, sound reactive discs or something in a 360 total surround scene. Then we just plug in the Oculus and the render happens immediately. Here. So of course there's none attached. But you have the left and the right eye render and the software gives you all the information where the head is pointing, where the controller is, if you've selected a button, all that information just comes in with this Oculus Rift here. It says it's not connected, of course, but this is the sort of information that comes in, where the eyes are looking. Left controller, is it connected, yes or no? Where its position is in the space, has the button been pressed, yes or no? It's all there. And they're all stuff that you can then drag and drop into the appropriate place in your scene. What else is there? Custom, no. Materials, that's just a special category for materials for a geometry, a 3D geometry, to make a reflective material, a constant material, just a color ramp. Here, for example, this is the classic 3D material. Color. Color emit, which means it emits color. Let's have a look at, put a ramp on it. Drag and drop that here and say, what do you want to attach that to? Okay, so it's put the ramp around. This is just a icon to show what the material does. They give you a donut. So now, if I want to attach it to this, I just say material. So let's put it on somehow, mapped it onto that. Yeah, there it is. Mapped it like that for some strange reason, but you need to know about texture mapping and all that stuff. It's 3D, first lesson. And then the final family are the ones that don't have a family. So like for a 3D camera, lights, spotlights, point lights, they're all different types of light. A 3D geometry, environment lights, what else is interesting? This bullet solver for doing dynamics. Window to go out to a projector. Let's look at that. So it wants an image that's going to go to the projector. Okay, so it's ready to send this to whatever projector I have attached, whatever monitor I have attached. So here, on this laptop, I've got an HDMI out, which is being cloned to go back here. I've got two mini display ports, so I can go out to 3 different projectors, 3 different monitors, whatever's attached. That's where this number comes in. So if you could see it now if I attach 3 monitors. That's how you choose where your image goes to. And for those who are learning, in Harp, they have this operator Snippets. What's Snippets in Italian? Pezzettini. So here it's got not all operators, but they've chosen many and given demonstrations. For example, the bullet solver, let's have a look at that. That's the one that calculates physical dynamics. This one. Let's have a look at that. Turn the music off. Where is the music? Okay, first put TouchDesigner in play and then start off the simulation because it's dynamic simulation. It's built this, repetitions of a cube. Same dynamics you see in video games to create dynamic simulations. With gravity, there's the gravity here. Let's change the gravity just to show if I reduce that gravity. Reinitialize. So you can change friction, all the parameters that are in there. Bit by bit you learn. This one, what's that doing? So in effect what it's doing is calculating collisions between objects and all that stuff. So this is where you can learn. And all this stuff you just cut and paste into your own projects. More questions? Please. Who out here has ever done any 3D, for example? SketchUp or a 3D Blender, 3D programs, no? After Effects? Photoshop? No one admits it. Okay, well that's about my talk.
Okay, so at the beginning you talked about video mapping on buildings.
Yeah.
And I'm very interested about this. So I wanted to ask you, how do you talked about, se mi sbaglio correggimi, you talked about a scanning of the wall.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm very interested about this part. I mean, it's something you realize by yourself?
Oh, no.
How? Ah, okay.
Oh, no.
So because I really interested to understand how do you start to interface yourself with, let's say, that wall, for example.
Well, exactly. Well, you ask someone else to do it.
Sorry?
If it's a wall...
Yeah, I mean, if it's a wall, it's just, but I mean, don't know, a space like this with chairs. No idea what.
Well, it depends what you're projecting on. If you're projecting on a wall, you don't have to do anything, you just project.
Yeah, I know, I mean...
But something like this is, there's two techniques. There's either a LiDAR scan, a laser scanner, which goes around, you know, 360 degrees, or there's this, which anyone can learn, photogrammetry, which is taking a number of photos and then you feed these photos into a software and it says, ah, right, I can see the same thing from different point of view, and slowly it calculates a 3D model. I think there's now programs you can use your phone to do the same thing. There's software around on a phone. The Kinect will do it even. But when the model arrives, it's probably very, very rough. So you need someone who knows how to do it well to get a smooth model. I'll show you this is what Oculus opened up. I should have, yeah, with Federico in Ugento. Let's see, this is a model he gave me. It was a scan of a tomb. Right, there it is. So, file in, I'm reading the file that he gave me. 20,000 points. And there it is. .3D model that he created with just photographs. That then has a material on it, has this material mapped onto it, and he did all this. It's not the sort of thing I do because it's too boring, too hard. I don't have the experience. So that's the model with the texture map. So just to show the 3D scene, here I've placed a camera somewhere, yeah, placed a camera there and a light source above. There's my camera looking around. The light source here, the circle. Animate the camera and we look around the scene. So where's the camera? I don't think this one's animated yet. Oh, it is, yes. It's just moving around with what? There, that starts it. See, there's my camera moving around slowly. I've used a button to start a speed to create the rotation. And here's my final render. And I think I used this square render to put on part of my final product for the church. So here I'm creating a movie, rendering out a movie. In fact, that's doing it now. Oops. Okay. And let's just look at the product, the final. Yeah, this is the project for the video mapping. Same system, I have a number of cues. Music by one of my students who's also very good now with TouchDesigner. He's one of these people who's doing both. All right, I forgot. I should have done that at 5 seconds in this one. Okay, so just to see that scene, look at the geometry viewer. It's slow because the wall had it was very dense polygon. There it is. Very dense. But the graphics card, you saw it was running at 60 frames a second, has no problem doing the rendering. It has problems when you'd want to change it. So here are my various light sources. That's a spotlight, light sources re-lighting the surface, which you'll see in the final render. And this was created with just photographs. Probably 30 photographs was enough. Different points of view, and then you use this. It's freeware, I think, the software that converts the photos into geometry. Then, of course, the second thing is we had 2 projectors in this scene, well, in this situation, because in the church there was a light, and also you needed 2 projectors to cover the space. So one was at human level, the other was about 4 meters high with a tower. There's photos somewhere. So from my laptop, I was sending to 2 projectors, but before doing that, there was a bit of correction to do, and we did that with MadMapper, like some warping and blending between the 2 projectors because the projectors overlap a certain point, and you have to blend between them so you don't have double intensity. There's a lot of nasty stuff. But there was a guy from the video service, he did all that, so I didn't have to bother. I just sent him the 2 full HD renders from here, and then I think, yeah, where is it? We should see a somewhere sending via MadMapper to the a spout out to MadMapper, which did the warping. That was the process.
Excuse me, I'd like to ask a little question. Going back to the 3D modeling, I wanted to ask if it's possible to rig the pieces that you're using in TouchDesigner.
You can, but it's in there. But I wouldn't do it. I'd do it. I always do it in Houdini.
Okay.
Character rigging,
Yeah.
no, it's there, but I think it's broken.
Okay.
Here. They might have even taken it out. It used to be here, bone. Yeah, there it is. So you have to chain them together and do it better, and then you have to do the capture, and it's better to import it.
It's a little complicated on TouchDesigner.
Well, it's just not built. It's from Houdini 4, and they never changed it, and that was 2002.
Okay.
So the tools in other software are much better. And then you import with capture regions, etc., and all your deformation happens on the graphics card.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Did everyone understand? Enough? Okay. Oh, one more.
About understanding, that is completely new for me. So there are these images that are animated by the motion of sound, but also some images, like the noise image, can modify the audio as well. Just let me know if I am correct. I want to know if I...
No, usually I don't modify the audio, but, and I don't even usually teach this, TouchDesigner can produce an LFO, and you can create your own audio from TouchDesigner, but it's better to do it in a specialized program. Usually the sound just goes out to the speakers, and TouchDesigner reads the audio either from the MP3 wave file or directly from the audio that comes in from the mixer.
Okay, and then that audio with the data will modify the image.
Yeah.
So as a musician, I am not quite familiar with the parameters of the visual and the image. So for TouchDesigner, it will be very intelligent to learn the parameters that can be modified with the image, and like to know how to do a 3D image and I know like the parameters of size, sound, speed, and then control image, but it will be basically focused on the image, being animated by sound.
Yeah.
Right?
In fact, this afternoon, I probably won't talk at all about 3D. Maybe just a little, but I think it's enough to just use flat images and modify them, modify the color, distort them, using the audio. For a 6-hour workshop, that's a lot.
Yeah, yes. Oh, thank you.
Or 4 hours, yeah, that's enough. Usually I start the first 4 hours, the interface, and then how to, like I showed before, how to convert a waveform to an image, and how to control a QuickTime movie, which is what a lot of people want to do, and then whatever people have in mind, what they can imagine, simple things.
Okay.
Hi, so I'm quite new too. I just use processing once, but I'm thinking about which is for you, which way you suggest to think about visual composition, because I can't really think about just video or audio. So I think them together. I think that they should be composed together. My method was to draw sketches, like some frames, and to put them on the line time, and then recreate it with my music, because I already had my partiture, but it was wrote inside the together with the sketches. So this was my method. Which one do you suggest to do a unique thing that works together always?
So you made sketches, and then with the music you did what? I didn't understand that.
I just drew by myself on a paper different sketches about what I was thinking, because I can't do a video on a paper, but I was doing sketches.
Oh, I see.
Then I just did it on processing.
But how did you do it on processing, from a sketch to...
Sorry, say it again?
How did you convert a sketch to something in processing?
No, I just wrote the code.
Oh, you wrote the code, right.
It was just a...
Right, so you used your sketches were like a storyboard for...
Yes, it was just for me. It was a kind of partiture to follow.
Yeah, I do the same. I often draw a storyboard because then it's more clear in my head.
Okay.
And I listen to the music and I put the time where the cues are first. Then I start thinking, and then I'll do a storyboard.
Okay, because
then I start doing it.
you have the music already, but if you don't have nothing,
Exactly.
and you have to imagine everything, like Greeks did with all that.
Well, that's the
art.
best thing. That's the best
Okay.
way. No?
So you suggest to do this method, to approach with this method?
That sounds good, yeah. Because, of course, you're faster with the pencil.
Okay.
When you imagine the music, you draw,
A lot, yeah.
then you think about processing, because that's when you're making, the woodwork.
Because it's easy to get lost inside the program.
Well, that's the problem, yeah.
Okay.
I find it a lot with my work. I get to a certain point and I start removing things because I made it too complicated and trying too many things, and then I just clean up and go. In fact, I remember a lot of designers used to say to that, just simplicity first and better ideas.
I agree. Thank you.
I see so often that people do visuals and there's so much stuff on the screen. You don't know what to look at. Because I find the thing is, especially with music that's good, your eye just wants to follow something. It's enough. You can just follow a dot for 10 minutes, for 2 minutes, or something that grows for a minute. So usually what I do is very slow. A lot of other people like fast cutting, but it, of course it depends on the music.
For example, in live electronics, using a wah-wah pedal in the instrument, will that also affect directly the image? It's possible, no?
Oh, I love wah-wah pedals. I used to use it with my clavinet,
Okay.
the Hohner clavinet. I imagine they exist now. There must be a wah-wah pedal that has a USB out that sends.
Yeah.
Because it's just a mechanical thing.
Yeah, but for example, you're like playing guitar or using the wah-wah, and then with the projection in live.
Yeah, you want to sync between the two. So what you
Yes.
need is a wah-wah pedal that has some sort of output MIDI or anything that arrives here.
And we'll go directly to TouchDesigner?
I don't know. I don't know what
Because
there's always a way.
Yeah, because you are syncing image, like also to do a projection, or using the guitar of sound like a spectrogram.
Yeah.
With a very nice design and be projected alive.
Yeah.
Will it just be synchronized through TouchDesign, or do you need to go through another kind of program?
The wah-wah pedal.
Yes.
You can use Arduino. Who is the guru? Arduino. We have one here. Or you can use serial in. There's many inputs. You find it all here. But it depends, of course, who builds the wah-wah. But you just have to have a custom. If you can't find it in the shop, you get one custom made.
Yeah, let's imagine we already have, like, you got a pedal of wah-wah at Thomann, and the electric guitar, and you just plug in and you just want to translate the sound to visual.
Yeah. No, I understand exactly what I'm just repeating. You just need the communication protocol between the wah-wah pedal. Here it's got MIDI out, USB, done.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. 0, wah-wah down, wah-wah up. That's it.
Okay.
0, 1, 0, 1. You just need the method of getting those numbers here.
Yes.
OSC would be the obvious one, but I mean, I've got an app on my phone that reads OSC, that sends OSC to TouchDesigner. It was free.
Okay.
You can make a little interface with sliders, and so you use your mobile phone to control TouchDesigner.
Oh.
It's called, not sure where my phone is. It's called Little OSC, OSC Controller. Just look at Google Store and you'll find lots of them. Now I'm just going to look for my OSC. No, I have to find my IP address. Okay. I'll show it in the class. Here's the app. Press the buttons and they should arrive here.
I have another question. I noticed the time bar on the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
Exactly how does that relate to the program? I mean, if you place an object on the left or right, somebody comes after or before the other, or
No, no, no. The timeline, it's set to 10 seconds, just goes round and round and round.
Yeah, I mean, what does it do in the program?
Good question. It's like a basic question. Let's say I'm reading a WAV file that lasts 1 hour. You can see it here. Best way to explain it's with an audio file. So, audio file in. So here's a default audio. Horrible. So how do we play it? We can re-cue it to start again. Starting from the beginning. But strangely, the timeline, look at the timeline, it's going from 1 to 600 round and around in a loop. If I change the play mode to be specify index, no, lock to timeline, it should just, this music will just loop around, only go to 10 seconds. There. So it's only taking the first 10 seconds of the audio file and looping it around because I locked it to the timeline and the timeline's only 10 seconds long.
Okay, so you can stretch the timeline to be as long as you want.
If you want, or you just ignore the timeline totally and just do this, sequential, and say start it with a pulse and it starts.
And I also see that under time code there is beats. On the left of the
yeah. That's if you're getting stuff from Ableton or if you're working in that.
Okay, so more MIDI
field. Yeah,
kind of. Okay.
Exactly.
And when it comes to this time code, which kind of uses can you make of it except for the looping motion of 10 seconds in this case?
Well, often what I've started doing now is using an index. So this is only reading the audio with an index.
Okay, so it progresses with time as a, okay.
So it's like you're scrubbing through. And I just generate that index myself. I just say constant, I think 60, whatever. And then 60 frames a second is should be my index. I want every frame is 1/60th of a second. And I send that to speed. See, that's 60, it's just constantly going up. So it's a constant, and I can use that as an index. That's how I'm doing things now. But this should be set to samples, I think. To frames. So I'm sending the frame index to this. So I'm controlling it from here.
Yeah.
That's how I work now. Which means I can calculate where I want to, because often when I'm rehearsing, I want to jump to the 6-minute point to test my visuals for that. So I need something where I can jump. I don't use the timeline much anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Hello. So I guess you're saying that, okay, now you kind of, because you said, okay, when I have to jump to a 6-minute thing, you create, as we see, like an object, an event, and you can just jump to it. But you, like, right now you just said, okay, I can do the loop with 10 seconds. And I guess you could code to make different events that would change accordingly. I mean, the loops or the time fraction or you can control the time better with coding, I guess. But could you also do that with, for example, the objects you have, to actually be able to kind of determine the time of each event of that? Okay.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be necessarily coded in. You can do it that way.
Oh, no. Oh,
You
no.
could use yeah, okay.
Here. Didn't show this, but let's make a animation. Add channels. Whatever you like. Set to 600. But, delete that. It was set to 600 because when I created it, it created an animation clip, I think the length of the timeline.
Okay.
So let's say the timeline is going to be longer. 60,000 frames, which is, I don't know, 5 minutes.
Yeah, right.
So now I can lock this to the timeline. So this is and let's say now I create animation component. Here, lock to timeline. Range, timeline. So it's created an animation like a master track,
Okay.
which is, looking down the bottom, let's add channel, 60,000 frames long.
Right.
So here I could put in
Great, so you can have all of the movements that...
all my keyframes here.
Yeah, all right. Oh.
Really painful. I don't like working like that, but because it's so...
Right, but at the same time, it's in a way better because you see the whole map.
Yeah, exactly. It's more traditional.
So you can use it's a very musical way of thinking, I believe.
Exactly, yeah. But it's not suited to a live show because, you know, you want to be dragging and dropping.
I'm talking about a set time frame. Okay, thank you very much.
That's how I used to work, and I've stopped doing it now. Because I've found it's just more efficient and more flexible because I can use... what I do is, if it's like the piece in Rome was a 5-minute loop with the music already done. So I did exactly what you're doing, and I had a master track that triggered off the cues. Because at the rehearsal, when I was testing things, I didn't want to be locked. I didn't want to be going backwards and forwards to keyframes. I just like clicking the buttons because it's more